Hey folks, so this is the last lecture that I'll be recording, and it is on a subcategory of one of our mechanisms called sexual selection. So sexual selection is a specific case of natural selection. So just to review, natural selection favors traits that increase fitness. And while we can think of fitness being things like strength, speed, ability to find food and avoid predators, and all of those different things, remember that fitness is directly related to successful reproduction. So as a reminder here, our giraffes can reach the tree and eat their food, but that is specifically contributing to fitness because it allows them to survive enough to have healthy offspring. So, sexual selection is a subcategory because it refers to the selective advantage of traits that directly contribute to reproductive success. So, not like buying, or finding food rather, but things that are directly related to mating. So, for example, on the other side here, you can see our peacock that has this big dramatic tail, or this beta fish that also has a big dramatic tail. Or down here, we have some moose that are fighting with their antlers. And these are all part of mating displays or mating behaviors. So, for example, this peacock, this display says to females that this male has beneficial traits and is attractive to her, so she would want to mate with him. Same thing for this beta fish. The moose are a little bit different because they're actually fighting over access to a female, but again, it's directly related to mating. The reason that we separate this out is that some of these traits may be good directly for reproduction, but they may not be beneficial for other aspects of fitness like survival. So if you look back at our peacock up here, if this male has this big dramatic display open, he's very vulnerable, partially because he's very visible. And so that means that he is going to be very visible to predators. Same thing with the beta fish. And then also there's a risk when the moose down here are fighting one another that they can actually injure each other. But again, the reproductive success basically trumps any sort of survival of fitness. And so, again, a lot of these characteristics related to sexual selection are about mating rituals and desirable characteristics. In species where the female is the choosier, and so that is usually where the female um, gives the most attention and spends the most energy on the offspring. Um, in those cases, the males can sometimes develop more extreme characteristics that are meant to sort of woo the female. So they're trying to get the attention of the females. And so they're competing over her. And this is considered sexual dimorphism. And so this means that the males and the females of the species have very distinct characteristics from each other. We can see this really easily in birds, and you can see this even in your backyard if you have cardinals. If you see a really bright red cardinal, that is definitely a male. And if you see one that has the same head structure and that orange beak but is more brown, that's the female. You can see this in these beautifully colored ducks here. And then one of my favorite examples here is this bird of paradise that this is actually a bird. So in the back here, this black splotch with the blue, this is the feather display of the male. So he has it up and he's actually dancing for the female. So again, expending energy, becoming vulnerable because they're visible, all of those kinds of things are really selected for because they are attractive to females. So it gives the males a more a higher probability that the female will mate with him. When we talk about things that are detrimental, the praying mantis definitely comes to mind. So these are the praying mantis. My queen down here says off with her head, and we've crossed it out and put his here. So when the female mates with the male, after the mating has concluded, she will actually bite the head off of the male. Obviously, this is detrimental for survival, but there is benefits for the female, including behaviors from the male and also nutrition, because now she's basically going to put a lot more of her personal energy and nutritional value into offspring. The dung beetle here, the males have horns and the females do not, so that's another dimorphic trait. And they try to roll a very large ball of dung, and so this is supposed to be very attractive to the female. Um, we do see this in humans, so one of the most Visible examples in humans is having a symmetrical face. So they often will show this with pictures where they take someone and basically divide their face in half and then double each half. So when you see this, this is the same woman, like this is her actual picture here. This is if you took the, I believe, left half of her face and just duplicated it to the right. And this is her right half of the face if you duplicated it to the left. Now, if all three of these pictures look very, very similar, that suggests that the face is very symmetrical. Symmetry in the facial structure is actually showing underlying successful development. So basically, it's a visible display of quote unquote good genes because your face develops inward from the outside. And so if it's doing that very symmetrically, it means that that regulation is working very well. There are other examples of sexual selection in humans. So, other than the visual, we also have the chemical. So, we do actually have pheromones and things that you won't actually know that you're perceiving that you do perceive. My favorite study, if you look up the smelly t shirts study, they figured this out by having females smell um, t shirts that males had worn for a significant amount of time and then looking kind of like at their underlying biological makeup to see whether they were attracted to certain males with certain underlying immune system genes. And they found that there was definitely a trend. So we know that there's these unconscious things that are triggering attraction that we may not be aware of. There are some very conscious things too, also with behavior and personality. So being funny, being a learner, so being well read, all of those sorts of things may not necessarily be directly genetic, but they are also contributing to your ability to attract a mate. So these can be non-genetic and inheritance. So you can inherit things in more social ways, not just genetically. And this is more of the like nature versus nurture. It's a bit of both. So this is more of the nurture aspect with humans tends to play a bigger part. So like I say here, there's a special case of this because there are things like personal choice that come into play, social capital, success in personal interactions. There's a lot of things that um, are important in our society that you may not actually see in other organisms out in the natural world. But we are not exempt from any of the evolutionary mechanisms, including this one.